So now let's talk about fractions. Fractions refer to parts of a whole. And this is really important when we want to talk about sharing things. And I know that we all really care that when we're sharing, that we are being fair. So let me give you an example. Let's pretend like this red circle is a cookie. And for this example, let's pretend like I was going to share it with Ellie. Ellie loves to try and eat my food. I would not usually give her a cookie, but we're going to pretend like we wanted to share this cookie. So right now, it's one whole cookie. So for us to share it, then we would need to make it into two pieces. When we're talking about fractions, it is really important that the pieces are equal. They're equal in amount. Even if the shapes don't look the same, they need to be the same amount. Most of the time, it's easiest to cut something into shapes or pieces that are going to look the same to make sure they are equal. So let's say I was going to cut this circle, our cookie. Would it make sense for me to cut it right there? I mean, I could do it, but it wouldn't be a fraction. It wouldn't be fair for sure, especially if I was like, all right, I'm going to take this side of the cookie, and Ellie, you can get that part. So this would not be equal. So if I wanted to make it equal, I would want to cut it down the middle, and voila, we've got two equal pieces. So when you partition or divide a whole into two equal pieces, these are called halves. I'm going to move those here. And we want to remember this is an important math word for us to remember, halves. So I've got two halves. If I take one of these pieces for myself, this is 1/2. And the way that I would write 1/2 is like this, 1/2. I also write in words, 1/2. That's only if I'm talking about one of them. If I'm only talking about one of these halves, it is 1/2. Now, you're not going to need to know the names of these parts of the fractions until later in school, like in probably 3rd grade. But since you are all smart, you know I like to teach you some things ahead of time. So I'll go ahead and tell you that the bottom number of a fraction is called the denominator. Denominator. And the denominator tells you the total number of pieces. So when I had this cookie and cut it, I made two equal pieces. So my denominator is 2 because there's two total pieces now. Now when I take my share of the cookie and I just take 1, that is the amount I took. So the top number is the numerator, and the numerator is the amount that you're talking about, whether it's the amount you took, it's the amount that you ate. But the top number is the numerator, and it's the number of parts. I think parts is a better word than pieces here. Parts you're talking about. So now I've got my two halves, two equal pieces that I cut the cookie into. But Ellie and I were thinking, you know, we like to save some of this cookie for later. And each of us would like to have two pieces so we could eat one now and one later. So 2 for her and 2 for me, that means we want 4 pieces and we want them to be equal. So to make 4 equal pieces, we want to partition our cookie into 4s. And the way we can do this, since we've already cut it into halves, is that we can cut this way. Remember, we don't want to cut down here because, that would not be equal pieces. We want to cut down the middle horizontally. Ta-da! Now we have 4ths. These are 4 equal pieces. The pieces are called 4ths. If I wanted to write a fraction for the amount that I was just going to eat today, so that means just 1/4, I would write 1 for the piece I want to eat today, the number of parts I'm talking about, and 4 for the total number of parts. Forgot that I want to use the word parts. The reason I want to use the word parts instead of pieces is because fractions aren't always about taking something and cutting it into pieces. You could be talking about fraction of like a class, be like half the class. And in that case, we're not talking about pieces. We're talking about like a part of the class. So that's why I think using the words parts is better. So my share for today is 1/4. And then I could save a 1/4 for another day. Ellie could eat a 1/4, and Ellie could save a 1/4 for another day. So there is one more type of fraction that we need to talk about. So I've gone back to a whole cookie, and we're going to think of a different situation. Let's say now I want to share this cookie with me, Ellie, and one other friend. So there's 3 of us. It means we want 3 equal pieces. So I want to think of how can I partition or divide this whole into thirds. So it'd be 3 equal pieces. And this is tricky to do. And you can watch Miss Shouter's video. I suggest watching it because she actually shows drawing it onto different shapes, but I'm pretending like I'm going to cut it with this knife. So when you're drawing it, it's going to be kind of like a Y, but you have to do kind of a wide Y to make sure you are making equal thirds. So like down this way, the thirds, 3 equal pieces. Now again, if I wanted to write a fraction for just my share, which would be 1/3, that would be 1 piece for me, and there's 3 total parts. So I get 1/3, Ellie gets 1/3, and our other friend gets 1/3. So we talked about several different types of fractions today. We talked about halves. That's when we partition a whole into 2 equal parts. We talked about fourths. That's when we partition a whole into 4 equal parts. And we talked about thirds, when we partition a whole into 3 equal parts. And it doesn't have to be with circles. It can be with any shape. It can be with groups of things. But what matters is that you have equal parts. Before we end, I want to quickly show you how you could partition drawing a different shape like a square. So let's start with doing 1/2. So remember, the number on the bottom, the denominator tells us the total number of parts that we want, and they have to be equal. So I'm going to make 2 equal parts, drawing a line right down the middle of the square. And then the numerator, the number on the top, tells us the number of pieces we're talking about. In this case, I'm going to shade it in to show 1/2. So that means I need to shade in 1 part or 1/2. Okay, now let's do a 1/4. 1/4. So the denominator, the number on the bottom, tells us the total number of parts, equal parts we need. I'm going to say that word equal over and over again this week because it's really important when we're talking about fractions. So I did 1 line down the middle. Right now I have halves. I'm going to do another line this way to make it fourths. So 4 equal parts. And the numerator is 1 because I want to show 1/4. So I'm just going to color in 1 of those parts. Finally, we want to show 1/3. So I need to make 3 equal parts. Try my best there. Make 3 equal parts. And I need to shade in 1 to show 1/3. Today in math, we're going to talk about how equal parts don't always have to be the same shape. So I've said over and over again all week that when we're talking about fractions, we want to make sure the parts that we're partitioning a whole into are equal in size and amount. But that does not mean they have to be the same shape. And I know that might sound confusing, but I'm going to prove it to you. So I have 2 squares here. I've colored them in just so that you can see them better, but I'll show you that they are the same shape square, same size square. And I'm going to try to partition them into halves in 2 different ways. And then I'm going to show you how even if they're different shapes, they are still the same amount. So they will still be equal. So I went ahead and drew the lines for how I'm going to partition the 2 squares. One of them I'm going to partition with a straight line down the middle that way. The other square I'm going to partition by cutting it diagonally. So now I'm actually going to cut them and prove to you that even though this half would be a different shape from this half, they are still going to be equal in amount. So first I'm going to quickly show you that the halves I partitioned each shape into are equal to each other. So like for the green square, where I cut it down the middle, I'm going to show you that these two parts are equal. Same amount. So these are two halves, and they would make a whole. For my pink square, where I cut it diagonally, these are also equal parts. Two equal parts means I partition it into halves, and together they make a whole square. Now I want to show you that this green half and this pink half are equal, even though they're different shapes. This is a rectangle, this is a triangle. If I was offering you pizza or cookie or whatever, and these two options, you might think one is bigger than the other. You might be like when I'm looking right now on the screen, to me it looks like the triangle's bigger. You might be like, I definitely want that one. That one's more. But what I'm about to prove to you is they are the exact same amount, even though they are different shapes. So here's how I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to put the pink one there, and I'm going to cut this extra part off. Okay. Let me take that extra piece. Oh my gosh. I hope your minds are blown. Same amount. All I did was cut it to show you that even though they were different shapes, they were the same amount. They were both halves because they were both halves of the same whole. So even though their shapes were different, they were equal. So now I have a challenge for you. I want to see how many ways can you find to partition a rectangle into equal boards. So what I just showed you was with halves. I want you to pause the video, get a piece of paper. Any piece of paper, can be an old paper, like here I've got like a writing checklist, turn it over. Whatever you got, this is a rectangle. So a normal piece of paper is a rectangle. How many ways can you find to equally partition this into fourths? I'm going to remind you, when you're cutting, some shapes at first may seem like they're not equal, but maybe they are. Last year my class had a lot of fun with this, and I remember there were some ways where they showed me and I was like, I'm not so sure. And then we played around with it and they were right. And I'm going to show you some of those ways when you unpause the video. So, but do pause. I want you to try it because I do think this is fun. I Googled it to check. I believe there are 12 different ways that you could partition a rectangle into 4 equal parts or fourths. Last year my class came up with 8. So see if you can match that or maybe find even more.